I came across a video of Andrew Klavan discussing the fatal flaw of atheism. Let's see exactly what that flaw is.
Here is the moment we are at, okay? And it makes me very optimistic. Our atheist friends who are running the culture have ceased to make sense.
Running the culture? I hate to break it to you, but atheists are not running the culture. At best, we're a minority in most of society. Being outspoken is not the same as running a culture. I think what you're trying to say is that secularism, that one's religious belief should be separate from the state, is the standard for today. But that's different from not believing in a deity at all.
That's what happens when you pull the bottom block out of the Jenga tower, it falls down, right? They are talking utter nonsense. When they say to you, there's no such thing as right and wrong.
No, it's not that there is no right or wrong. There is no objective right or wrong. Perhaps it's a bit subtle, but there is a difference. There are no molecules of good or bad, no atoms that make up right or wrong.
Take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder, and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy.
What one person sees as a good thing, others could see as evil. For example, some people say that tearing children away from their parents is the right thing to do, while others see that such an action would cause irreparable harm. No, I'm referring to the residential schools, one of the darker chapters of Canadian history. Forcibly separating families caused great harm to those kids. I don't agree with a lot that Harper said, but he is right there. This is why I try to live my life by the harm principle. If an action or policy harms another without any substantial good that will come from it, I would say that action is wrong.
Therefore, if you judge another culture, you're wrong.
No, I totally judge cultures by the actions they take. If you were to detain a certain section of the population in camps because we feel they were a threat simply because of the fear relating to others of that group, then those actions cause great harm and I would judge that culture for it. No, I'm talking about the internment of Canadians with Asian ancestry back in the 1940s. Another black mark on our history. So, I judge the culture back then as wrong, and hopefully we've learned from it so it will not happen again in so-called civilized countries.
They sit around and they say men and women are completely the same. The internal life of a man and the internal life of a woman, completely the same.
No, people are not saying there are no biological differences between men and women. Along with the obvious physical differences, brain structure related to how people identify themselves differ between men and women. What people who want equality are getting at is that while there are biological differences, that shouldn't be a barrier to living the life you want, or be used to discourage people from achieving their desires. If a woman wants to enter a field that is normally seen as a man's position, or if a man wants to do what is considered women's work, they should be allowed to apply. This doesn't mean they should automatically get into said field, but if they're qualified, then their gender should not prevent them from doing a job. Obviously, there are jobs that only one gender could do. I'm never going to be a surrogate.
Where's the fetus gonna gestate? You're gonna keep it in a box?
And, as talented as she is, my wife will never get a position where writing her name in the snow is an essential qualification.
And, I think, okay, I've lived a long time. That's not the way it looks to me. But, great, believe what you want. But then they say, oh, I'm a woman in a man's body. And you say, well, if there's no difference, how do you know? How do you know? If men and women are exactly the same, what would it be like to be a woman in a man's body? It would just be like being a man in a man's body. They're just the same. They're not making any sense.
Well, as I said, brain structures are different between men and women. In the transgender brain, those structures, specifically the nucleus of the striated terminals, are more likely to align with those of the gender they identify with rather than the gender they are assigned at birth. So, these people who see themselves as a gender that does not conform to the body they find themselves in may be going against the norms of society, but there is no reason they shouldn't live the lives they want to. And it has to be noted that none of this has anything to do with the lack of belief in some omnipresent creator deity. Yes, atheists are more likely to be accepting of transgender people, and in general, atheists may be more left than right-leaning, but that does not mean that everybody fits neatly into your little description. And while the majority of them are accepting, I have met transphobic atheists who think how somebody identifies themselves must reflect the genitals they were born with and not their brain structure. In any event, what does being more accepting of others have to do with a belief, or lack of belief, in an omnipotent creator being? There are people out there who believe in a deity, but have the crazy idea that how people identify is their own business. Unless, of course, you're saying that only atheists are accepting of others and allowing people to live their lives, and that conversely, the more religious members of a community are unable to tolerate any change in social attitudes. And that just isn't true. I've seen open-minded and accepting theists, and closed-minded, intolerant atheists. Just because, as a believer, you act that way doesn't mean that everybody does. And getting back to the central topic of this video, how is this a fatal flaw in not accepting the claim that there's a creator? Just because you don't like where society is going doesn't mean that we have to accept that there's intelligence behind the universe. No matter how much you want there to be one, or how much better you think the world would be if an omniscient deity existed, that doesn't mean that one does.
Girls will be boys and boys